So, yeah, I'm just gonna read off my notes, talk to you, and walk around. Pretty cool. Okay. All right. So, pretend right now that you're in the classroom right now. You're sitting down, right? And I'm the teacher, and I'm gonna give you like a 5 to 10 minute lecture about David Lee. Okay? It's gonna be very simple, very easy. Just it's all good. Let's follow along, kids. All right, so the question that we're trying to answer today in class, right? The question we're trying to answer is, why is David Lee an important figure in Asian American history, particularly Korean American history? Well, before we answer that, I'll just give you a little background about David Lee, okay? Like what kind of a person he is. David Lee, he studied Chinese classics, and he had a little bit of religious training at Songsu College in Korea. And this was Korea before it was annexed by Japan. So it was like in the early 1900s. There's no particular date on when he studied it according to the National Archives. So, let's just say it was in the early 1900s, okay? And in 1903, he decided to come here to the United States as a student so that he could continue his education. Well, what happened when he came here? 10 years later, he graduated from Berkeley, and then 5 more years later, he graduated from the San Francisco Theological Seminary. And here's the significance about him graduating from both of these schools. He was the first Korean to do so, okay? The first Korean. If you were the first Korean, or if you were the first in your family to do anything like graduate college like me next year, that's a big deal, okay? But I'm not here to talk about David Lee being the first Korean to do this and that, okay? That's besides the point. The bigger point that I want to talk about is in my notes, and this is something I wrote up, okay? So excuse me if I sound a little bit like a robot, but this is what I wrote about David Lee, and I wrote it for you guys, so here we go. Reverend David Lee, also the first president of the Korean National Association, was an advocate tirelessly serving the emergent Korean American community in the early 1900s. In a time period filled with anti-Asian sentiment, Mr. Lee fought for the legal entry of Korean immigrants into the United States. These immigrants were fleeing Japanese persecution following the annexation of Korea, but upon arriving in the United States, were detained at Angel Island. His selflessness was not only respected by the Korean American community, but also the authorities here at Angel Island, who viewed him as a man of integrity and respected his opinion. So basically, what's the point of listening to all that? You heard a bunch of words. The point is, he was a tireless advocate for his community, and he did everything in his power to have the backs of these immigrants. But wait, there's more. Mr. Lee was not just an advocate on behalf of Korean immigrants. He was also involved in the development of the Korean American community, creating the first Korean language school and the first Korean typesetting machine. So Mr. Lee was not just involved in serving the Korean immigrants who came here to Angel Island, but he was also involved in creating the Korean American community here as well. One of these examples of the Korean immigrants he supported, his name was Pak Ni-kun, Paknikun. I read about him at the National Archives, so excuse me if I'm pronouncing his name wrong. But anyways, just to give you a little background about him, he came here, he understood a little bit of English, but he still wasn't fluent in English, and he was a pretty educated Korean immigrant. The records go on to say that the immigration authorities eventually asked him about his education in the United States, right? And by the way, this is everything, I wrote all this, okay? I'm not plagiarizing or anything. This is all a recreation of the documents that I examined at the National Archives. So this is basically what I wrote So this was the part about the immigration officials asking Mr. about his education. He was asked in English if he would go to evening school or day school here in the United States. He initially said an evening school, but once his translator, Reverend David Lee, translated a question asking him about his intended daytime activities, Mr. Pak realized he misunderstood the questions and clarified his academic enrollment. He would attend day school in the United States instead of night school. So basically, it's subtle actions like this by Mr. Lee that shows that he has the back of these Korean immigrants, that he was doing everything in his power to fight for the legal entries of Korean immigrants into the United States. So with that said, now that you have a little example of how he was supporting the Korean immigrants who are coming here, what's the main point of today's lecture? Well, it's the answer to my question. And the question is, why is David Lee an important figure in Asian American history, particularly Korean American history? It's because Mr. Lee, in a period of intense anti-Asian sentiment, promoted, preserved, and advanced the Korean nationalism that was brought over by these immigrants. So what the hell does that mean? Like what does that mean in layman terms? In other words, basically, Mr. Lee was able to keep the Korean identity and its culture intact after Korea was annexed by Japan. And by doing so, he also advanced the Korean identity and culture by getting involved in the community here. So that's basically what it means, and that's why Mr. Lee is a very important figure in Asian American history. Thank you.
Thanks, David. You know how to get back to the boat, right? Okay. We don't want you to miss that 12:25. It's on his phone. Okay. Now I'm really happy to introduce Eugenia or Jean Bailey. She's kept the amazing story alive of the 526 Russian refugees who arrived on Angel Island in 1923. Two of these passengers were her parents. So last year she helped commemorate the 90th anniversary of this boat landing, and she'll tell the amazing story of how this one boat managed to make it to the United States. Jean?
Generosity and the kindness of the United States government. They were part of a large group numbering 526 refugees aboard the US Air Transport Merritt, which arrived from the Philippines to Angel Island on July the 1st of 1923. At that time, Russia was one of the many were leaving in droves in hopes of escaping the Bolshevik menace. One of the departments for a quick getaway, in haste, Admiral George Stark assembled 17 many not seaworthy ships. Thousands flocked aboard. And during the week of October 21st, 1922, the ships slipped out of the Golden Horn Bay and out into the sea of Japan. With no pre-planned This poor flotilla met with some horrific challenges. The unrelenting stormy seas, the loss of 2 ships, and plagued with famine, disease, and in some cases death. Help was not forthcoming. Luckily, the United States government, being informed of the plight of these refugees, offered them asylum on the Philippine Islands. The remaining flotilla assembled in the Bay of Manila, and the refugees were encamped outside the city of Manila. This would be their temporary new home. In time, some got jobs and chose to remain in the Philippines. Others accepted offers from countries such as Australia, New Zealand, South America. A large group accepted an offer from the United States government for free passage to America aboard the Merritt. Last July, a memorial was held at the same spot that we're being here at this at Angel Island, the 90th year of that historic event, and to pay tribute to the unsung heroes for the remarkable courage and the risk they took, with possibly losing their lives, but for the freedom and a new life. And I want to say that I'm most grateful to Grant. With his contacts in Honolulu, I was able to obtain copies of newspaper photos and articles covering the Merritt short stay in Honolulu, allowing the passengers to get off the ship and to take in the city sights. I'm reaching out to individuals whose relatives might have been on the Merritt. Most of the original passengers are no longer with us, but perhaps the first, second, or even third generation may have historic material stashed away, maybe in shoe boxes, photos, letters, and notes, perhaps in a foreign language. We're always searching to enhance our Merritt collection. In time, we will begin planning for the centennial, which will be July the 1st, 2023, with an informational exhibit honoring those who arrived at Angel Island July the 1st of 1923. I hope that my words today will shed some light on the Russian connection with the island and are of some interest to the residents in the Bay Area. I thank you for your attention.
Thanks, Jean. Jean, will you have materials inside that people can look at? Okay, great. I also brought an article from, I think, a local paper about this ship. Next, I would like to introduce Linda Harms Okazaki, and she's an amazing researcher and fourth-generation San Franciscan. She's a member of a wide variety of groups that I don't think any of our other speakers are members of all these groups. The Association of Professional Genealogists, as well as the Daughters of the American Revolution, and other local and national organizations. And she'll have information about the California Genealogical Society inside. Right? That's a local group based in Oakland that's a statewide genealogical group. And we'll learn about how her great-grandfather was a night watchman on Angel Island, and also how her husband's family came through Angel Island. So a combination of both sides of her family. Now, Linda?
Okay, that's better. I have 2 stories to tell you today. One about my great-grandfather and one about my husband's great-grandfather. Both of them intersected through here at the same time on Angel Island. Their stories really differ wildly.